Good morning, everyone. We are so happy to have you here at our end of the year conversation, coffee talk, calling forth freedom. We have a special guest today, Dr. Naya Jones, and we'll get to a little bit more about her in just a moment. But I wanted to just um, remind everybody that you are here. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project is a social justice initiative, and we aim to do three things. The first is to locate and map settlements and to illuminate the intersection with risk and development. The second is to record grassroots placemaking and keeping histories. And the third is to collaborate and apply our research methods in order to assess conditions and devise solutions in partnership with descendants to make change. Now I will hand it over to Dr. Roberts, and she will explain a little bit more about our show today.
Thank you, Skylar. So again, my name is Andrea Roberts, Dr. Andrea Roberts. I'm an assistant professor at Texas A&M University. I'm the founder of the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, and I'm excited to welcome you to Calling Forth Freedom. So today, we have an interesting name, an interesting structure for the show. And the structure for the show comes out of what you see behind me. People often ask me, what is this symbol, Andrea? It's a Sankofa bird. And it's a symbol that says it is not wrong to look back and learn from the past before going forward. And we are manifesting that principle with the structure of the show today, because we are going to do a review, a look back at 2020 and look at what we've been able to grow together, accomplish together with our community of descendants, with our research team of students and supporters. And then we'll have Dr. Naya Jones take us forward. Dr. Naya Jones, a friend of mine, first of all, a close friend, bridges research and practice as a geographer and cultural worker. Her work explores themes of race and place with a focus on Black diaspora geographies of collective health and healing using art making and art-based methods. As a trauma-informed healing arts practitioner since 2008, her background shapes her approach. Dr. Jones is an assistant professor of sociology at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and core faculty in global and community health. She's just completed a stint as a National Culture of Health Leader, which is a program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And Calling Forth Freedom is a three-part engagement that she's doing with Texas Freedom Colonies Project. And this is the first of that three-part engagement. And this is a project sponsored in part by the Whiting Foundation and the Academy for the Visual and Performing Arts Visual Workshop Grant. So that's what's happening today. And we'll be at this point looking at our year, where we've been, where we're going. So at this time, I want to hand it back over to Skylar.
The Texas Freedom Colonies Project 2020 Year in Review. What is the Texas Freedom Colonies Project? The Texas Freedom Colonies Project is an evolving social justice initiative which celebrates, researches, and documents historic Black settlement landscapes, heritage, placemaking, and grassroots preservation practice. The descendants that we connect and partner with are actively fighting decades of structural racism that threaten their ability to retain land and bounce back following a natural disaster. Texas Freedom Colonies Project has identified 3 key threats to the Freedom Colony survival. Those threats are visibility, accessibility, and vulnerability. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project has also outlined the Texas Freedom Colony Descendants Agenda. Some of these agenda initiatives include establishing a centralized location for information and communication among descendants, and having a public policy and legislative agenda. The Texas Freedom Colony's pre-COVID-19 engagement. In February 2020, Dr. Roberts and students enrolled in the More Than Monuments course had the opportunity to visit Hopewell Freedom Colony in Cozy, Texas. In this class, students also created a Freedom Colonies guidebook. This guidebook provides information about recognizing a freedom colony, identifying feature types such as churches and cemeteries, and much more. Dr. Roberts and two of her students, Skylar Carter and Grace Kelly, attended the Preserving the Promise Gala event in Jasper, Texas. The evening was filled with diversity, inclusiveness, a silent auction, dinner, live entertainment with still cruising and dancing. Dr. Roberts was the gala's keynote speaker, and the Jasper County Historical Commission announced the approval of a state historical marker for the Dixie Freedom Colony, who hosted the event. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project Juneteenth Outreach. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project participated in several presentations this summer in celebration of Juneteenth. This included a Texas Freedom Colonies Project Juneteenth Happy Hour. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project also participated in the Preserve the Culture Oral History Project Zoom tutorial, which was hosted by the Houston Museum of African American Culture, the African American Library at the Gregory School, and the Houston Library. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project also participated in the Schoenberg Center Juneteenth Question and Answers. The Schoenberg Center is the biggest and oldest archive records and is based in Harlem. The Texas Freedom Colonies also discussed the origins of Juneteenth and the home of Juneteenth, being Galveston, Texas, and East Texas community of Geneva, Texas. We also discussed some parallels between the current issues plaguing our communities, such as COVID-19 and the persistent struggle for justice and freedom in the face of anti-Blackness, and making space to remember George Floyd, a Houston, Texas native. Texas Freedom Colonies Projects, Presentations, and Promotions. Doctoral students Skylar Carter and Jennifer Blanks presented in the Necropolis Politics, Mourning, Reclamation, and Preservation in BIPOC Sacred Spaces Symposium, as well as creating a video for the Texas A&M College of Architecture Research Symposium. Dr. Roberts and doctoral student Skylar Carter also presented research on two separate panels, the Vernacular Architecture Forum and the Southeast chapter of Society of Architecture Historians. Dr. Andrea Roberts presented in the Reclaiming Spaces and Places Symposium this year as well. This is the symposium's fourth year. During the presentation, speakers like Dr. Roberts, Matisse Haynes, and June Grant discussed what steps need to be taken for BIPOC communities to achieve liberation and equity. Dr. Andrea Roberts served as a diversity mentor at the virtual conference for the National Trust of Historic Preservation Pass Forward Conference in October 2020. Doctoral student and team member Jennifer Blanks was awarded the Online Diversity Scholarship and was able to attend the Pass Forward Conference. The Texas Freedom Colony's new outreach and research solutions. This summer, the Texas Freedom Colonies launched its quickly growing Coffee Talk series. Coffee Talk allows us to invite professionals, experts, and stakeholders to engage in conversations about various topics that impact freedom colonies. So far, we've discussed the immediate impacts of COVID-19 on Black funeral homes in Texas Freedom Colonies, museum curation, and Black settlements, honoring our ancestors via the burial grounds, and the state of Black churches. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project also launched the highly anticipated Adopt a County campaign. Adopt a County allows Freedom Colony descendants and stakeholders to contribute to the mission of the Texas Freedom Colonies Project in a new way. We also launched the I Found Something contest. This collaborative photo contest requires descendants and stakeholders to send a photo with your phone number, name, the place of the picture, and the name of the person in the picture if it is known. We will post the picture on our county pages on Facebook and let others know what you found. The winner will receive a Texas Freedom Colony goodie bag. All of the pictures are to be emailed to freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com. Texas Freedom Colonies current projects. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project received the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund from the National Trust for Historic Preservation in 2019. We are partnering with Freedom Colonies to develop a mobile assessment tool to capture information about their cemeteries and develop a registry. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project contracted the Root Cause Research Center and Civic Data Alliance to fulfill the mission of the National Trust grant. Recently, the Texas Freedom Colonies Project connected with descendants from Tamina and Dixie Community Freedom Colonies. This meeting is an important step to pushing forward the Cemetery Research Project, which is funded by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project is broadening our impact by connecting with neighboring states such as Louisiana on future projects. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project collaborated with the Landowners Association of Texas to address issues of retaining air property and land loss in general in East Texas counties through workshops and needs assessments. Another major component of the collaboration with the Landowners Association of Texas is a series of legal webinars covering topics such as air property, church incorporation, and church preservation. These webinars are supported by the Texas A&M University Law School as well. The Texas Freedom Colony Project Next Steps and Current Tasks. Visitors can now use the Atlas to learn about future Department of Transportation projects occurring near Freedom Colonies. Adding current and future transportation projects to the Atlas allow Freedom Colony descendants and stakeholders to be proactive rather than reactive when a new highway project threatens their community. Dr. Andrea Roberts has published quite a bit of literature this year as well. These journals can be accessed via Google Scholar on Dr. Roberts' Scholar webpage and the Texas Freedom Colonies Project website. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project is proud to share a financial resource provided by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Funding for the National Trust is awarded to nonprofit organizations and public agencies, and a majority of their funding is awarded for planning and education projects through their National Trust Preservation Funds grant program. You can scan this QR code to learn more information about the grants available, or you can contact the grants office at grants@savingplaces.org. The Texas Freedom Colonies Project is still accepting members to join Adopt a County. Use your cell phone to scan the QR code and access the Adopt a County sign-up sheet. Once you access the sign-up sheet, you will be able to complete the form and answer questions such as selecting your county, submitting your Google form, joining a Facebook group, understanding what information is needed, locating that information based on resources we provide you with, and then uploading that information. Please make sure you visit the Texas Freedom Colonies Project website to complete the Storyteller Survey. This survey allows you to share important information about your Freedom Colony, such as its origin story, history, population, family names, traditions, events, and feature types. Or you can use your cell phone camera to scan this QR code and access the survey. If you prefer a printout copy of the survey, that's no problem. Visit the Texas Freedom Colonies Project website or use your cell phone camera to scan the QR code to access the printable version of the survey. You can scan the completed survey to your computer and email it to freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com, or you can mail it to an address found on the top of the survey form. The Freedom Colonies Project wants to learn how we can serve other organizations. If you enjoy the research we do at the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, please complete our intake form. This form allows you to learn about our activities, serve as a volunteer, or become a partner on future projects. Please request the intake form by sending us an email at freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com. And lastly, an Ancestors Tribute. Mr. Eddie Harrison played a crucial role to the rehabilitation and historical designation of the Camptown Cemetery near Mount Rose Missionary Baptist Church. The burial site began as a slave cemetery, but later received Civil War veterans and Buffalo soldiers. He also conducted educational programs on Buffalo soldiers at numerous public venues around the Brazos Valley. Mr. McQueen would go on to visit 375 churches and travel over 90,000 miles to catalog their growth and development. His book, Black Churches in Texas, A Guide to Historical Congregations, was published by the Texas A&M University Press on April 20th, 2000. This journey became a spiritual one for Mr. McQueen. Thank you so much for joining us. Please follow us on Facebook at the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, on Instagram at freedom_colonies_project, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Freedom Colonies Project channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find our previous coffee talks, tutorials on how to navigate the Texas Freedom Colonies Project website and atlas, as well as our other speaking engagements. So make sure you check it out. Again, feel free to inquire about our intake survey at the following email address, freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on our social media platforms.
Oh, I have to take a deep breath on that one. I cannot tell you how incredibly thankful I am and how privileged I feel to have such a tremendous team of junior researchers and emerging researchers that make this team make our work happen. That's the team that make this happen. There is no staff in office, and this is not a full-time nonprofit. But I feel as if, and I feel strongly about this, that we've been able to do so much. And I'm just incredibly thankful for my team. So thankful, in fact, that I want to allot some space for them to reflect on the year in review. And I want to invite Skylar to begin that process of any reflections or anything she wants to share about the last year.
Yeah, that excuse me, that video. Yeah, a lot has happened in 1 year. I am definitely, as I reflect, I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity to be on this team, because we are truly doing, I think everybody thinks their work is very important. I mean, you have to, but I think we're really doing some great things, and we're really impacting the community and many communities, not just the BCS, Texas A&M community, academic community, but all the communities that we work for and freedom colonies that we serve really depend on us to be that, liaison between the resources that they have previously not been, privy to, or have not been as accessible to. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity, and I'm thankful to, work for these, for the communities. And yeah.
So with that, why don't we go ahead, Jennifer, if you feel moved to share, to testify at this time, I welcome.
I do. I definitely want to
Thank
echo
you for the
Sky.
video. First, thank you for the video, everybody.
I definitely want to echo Sky in saying I do feel grateful to be a part of this team. I feel grateful to do this kind of research. It doesn't really feel like research. I say that all the time because it just feels so natural for me to do. And I'm just really thankful, Dr. Roberts, that you you're allowing me to be on the team. I think one of the biggest highlights for me this semester was actually going to the Hopewell Freedom Colony with you and the students in the Modern Monuments class, just because it's one of the more rural, so to speak, freedom colonies. I'd never been to a freedom colony, I think, outside of maybe the Fourth Ward in Houston. So it's really a good experience for me to have that experience, especially being a member on the team and fully understanding um, just the geography of those communities, of the freedom colony communities, and just seeing the artifacts at the homestead, and it was just so well preserved. And then finding out that the Hopewell Freedom Colony, um, I mean, people were still living there in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, and that's not so long ago. And it just really raises the awareness around those three key threats: visibility, accessibility, and vulnerability, and how people are still living in these communities and they still need help. They still need support and resources. And so, again, just like really excited and grateful to do the kind of work that we're doing. And it was definitely a highlight for me. And then I guess I'll just quickly add being able to represent the research team and presenting at the ESRI headquarters earlier this year in California. Everybody knows who Dr. Roberts is at ESRI now. So if they know me, they know her, vice versa. So it's really good to represent the team that way and kind of put us in another audience, especially the geospatial audience, and hoping to see where that can connect to the digital humanities that we're already doing. So I think that's all I'll have
Oh,
to share for now.
awesome, awesome. So Valentina, I know you're having some camera challenges, but if you want to go ahead and just share by sound, that's perfect.
Yes, I am very thankful to have joined the team. I think one of the biggest challenges this year has been COVID, and it's been um, it's been very difficult for all of us. And I was lucky enough to join the team once you had already transitioned and troubleshooted a lot of things to make this happen during COVID times. And it's just the things that I see and the huge disconnect that people have during COVID, especially what shelter in place means for people of color, and depending on your social location, how it is harder for some of us, especially those of us who are more community oriented and who depend on that engagement with our communities. Um, that shelter in place just becomes even more challenging, and the work that the Texas Freedom Colonies, and I'm going to say we because I'm part of this now, that we do, it was already hard enough pre-COVID to create this to foster public engagement, to connect people, to have people work together for the issues that are more pressing to us. So COVID made this even more challenging, and the way that I see the Texas Freedom Colonies Project and what we do to foster these spaces now in online formats to keep people connected and engaged and working together, and just creating spaces for dialogue where we can have these cathartic moments to really um, just keep building that social fabric that is now so much needed. Is It's priceless for me, and not just as service, but this is our life, this is our research, and it's also just part of our humanity that can oftentimes be lost. So I am so grateful to be part of this project, and I can't wait to see what we're going to do next year.
Thank you, Valentina. I needed that. I ask so much of all of you all the time. And to have that, to feel that this experience gives you that is very edifying and very, very encouraging. We have other team members here. I hope they don't feel put on the spot, but if there's anything that they're moved to share, I want to make sure that they have time to share. Van or Sophia, if you'd like to just, or Kendall, if you have any short message, go ahead and share it now if you'd like. I'll give you some space.
Sure. I just wanted to say that I joined the team pretty recently, so I'm very new as well. But I'm very thankful for all the work that the team has been doing to help me catch up and to also learn for myself, learn about the Texas Freedom Colonies Project as well, to learn what we do. So I'm really thankful for the team, and also just engaging with the descendants and everybody through emails. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to go on site due to COVID, but despite that, everything has been going great. And yeah, so route back just to thankful, and that I hope to continue learning about the project as well.
Awesome. Kendall?
I've been working with the Freedom Colonies Project since January, and it's been so fun. It's been super crazy having to adapt to all the COVID stuff, but I've had an absolute blast, and it's been an amazing experience to learn and have this opportunity. So yeah, this has been a phenomenal experience. Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts. And this team is just so awesome, and I couldn't ask for better coworkers or friends. So yeah.
Sophia, don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, not at all. I am very recent participant of the Texas Freedom Colonies, and coming in, I had no idea what a freedom colony was. So just like coming in, just like being thrown in and learning about it and being like amazed by like, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like everyone needs to know this is a thing. And even learning like the Tamina Freedom Colony is literally like, I live like 5 minutes away from it. So that was really like so interesting, like learning about. But yeah, it's exciting hearing everything like this group has done, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it and help out.
That's awesome. And I have to tell the audience right now that I promise you, I did not make them say these things. So I am hearing and learning all of this in real time. And it's wonderful. And so this has really shaped the approach that I've wanted to take to the show today, which is the culmination of several conversations that I've had with our guest, our wise leader and teacher for today, that I'm going to be in conversation with, the good Dr. Naya Jones. This is an incredible moment that we've been working to manifest, and yes, making it happen for real. We did this. So I'm really excited to be in conversation with her for the next time that we have, 45-50 minutes. And I know that she wants to bring us into an understanding of a particular mode or methodology or way of working in the world. And I want to hand it over to her to bring us into that right now.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I can feel, oh my, there was so much excitement on Instagram. I know on Facebook as well, from people we know, from people we didn't know knew each other, right? I was like, wait a minute, you know that person, right?
Yeah.
So that was so beautiful to see. So I'm really feeling how people are so very present. And thank you all for that opportunity to bear witness, right? The words testimony, calling forth, bearing witness, all of these are so integral to African-American geography specifically, and to Black geographies in general. And if you're not sure what the heck we're talking about in terms of Black geographies, that's one thing we'll be exploring here together today as well. But before we get started, one of the things I so appreciate about doing arts-based or somatic kinds of and embodied research is the slowing down of the tempo and the really reflecting and taking in of what the heck just happened. The Texas Freedom Colonies team just offered a tremendous gift in terms of Sankofa and looking back, and now we're moving forward into the conversation. And so I'll share with you, and you're welcome to join in if you're wherever you may be. And if you're not able to join in at this time, perhaps when you listen to the recording, you can practice this with us. But I do invite you to close your eyes if you're in a comfortable and safe place to do so. I'm going to close my eyes. Can we just take a few breaths together and acknowledge that this is embodied work. This is somatic work. And my, has this been a year of being embodied and feeling in so many ways, as Valentina and others lifted up. Acknowledging how some of the ancestors that Andrea really named and Texas Freedom Colonies has named, how they talked about their research being and their work being a spiritual journey as well. However you take spirit, mystery, the broader meaning and purpose of life, whatever that might mean for you and for us. And just taking 3 breaths, and I'm going to do it kind of dramatically, right? Partly just to really breathe in and breathe out, but doing what you need to do, inhaling and exhaling. Does it feel good to bring your palms or your hand or your hands to your heart space and inhale? And breathe out. Does it feel good to raise an arm, raise both arms, raise 2 arms, do whatever you need to do, raise something, and inhale and breathe out. And opening your eyes as you're ready. And throughout the conversation, when you hear us pause, when you hear us maybe move into a silent moment, inviting yourself to do that too. So many times in conversations, especially in academic space, and some of you may be nodding your head, policy space, activism space, there's a rushing through. Can we slow down together here today? And I'm so excited to slow down with Andrea in our conversation and really feel into this work. And we'll talk more about why the breathing, why the moving as we kind of move forward as well. I'll turn it to Andrea to talk a little bit more about how we are moving together.
And how she's helping me move us. It's funny, I look through the year in review and see, oh my gosh, we did all these things. We can knock them off and say, do. And some of it moves us more than we get to move it. And it's a blessing. Okay, we're moved and we're called to do things, but how can we call forth what we want to do in an intentional way? And that's very much what this calling forth is about, or what I hope it to be about. And when I talk about calling forth, it is an intimate, emotional process of accessing embedded and embodied knowledge. And so we're real good, or we're doing real well at accessing knowledge that's embedded in social exchange and in experience and in reading and in archives and in forgotten spaces. I think we work pretty well that way. But what we need at this time, what I think Texas Freedom Colonies Project, I know I need personally to continue doing this, is to engage the somatic and the embodied. And what that means to me is about affirming and foregrounding the value of our known and lived knowledge. And to be able to validate that more. And for me to validate that in you and you to validate that in me, in spite of whatever context we find ourselves in, which doesn't. So let's say that truth right now. How do you keep doing this in call forth a freedom of how we want to operate in the world, what kind of impact we want to make, and how much we want to bring of ourselves into that, when a lot of the institutions and the spaces in which we try to do this work doesn't foster or doesn't help us incubate that. How do we incubate that? Those are the questions that I think led me and then led us in conversation to think through, both of us who do what people call engaged research or community-based research, which still has a clinic kind of sounding taste to it that is, makes me feel away. And so what I'm hoping that we do in this beginning conversation is really get some a quality of language around calling forth what that means to the descendant communities and what it means to us as a team, what it means to me, and what it means to you. So I just want to open with that.
Andrea, did you see me going?
Yes.
I'm feeling.
So and that's why I want you to, if
Yes.
you would, when you feel moved, is we say these words embodied and we say somatic. And so what does that have to do with your mapping, Dr. Roberts? What does that have to do with your stories? What does that have to do with, intersection with risk? And, where's the model? Where's the answers? Give me the statistics, fix the problem. Those are the pressures, right? Those are the things. But this other mode of addressing, manifesting solutions, researching is coming through. And so we want to birth this today. We want to birth this as a new kind of era for Texas Freedom Colonies Project of the somatic, if that makes sense.
It
and
does.
So just if you could tell everybody, what is this word somatic? What were we talking about?
What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, and I think that, I appreciate the word, and I feel like I know we have some ability to take questions and responses from chat, and maybe if people can just say, have you heard the word somatic lately? And if you can say yes on Facebook, or not so much, or no, or what the heck is that? And maybe I think we're going to have it put into our chat here on Zoom so we can see it. And as the wonderful team is kind of paying attention to those responses, I'm not sure if somatic is even the language I would want to use. And one of the things I appreciate about what you just said, Andrea, too, is that the language is actually really important. It's not like we're just doing it for fun. It's not just semantics. The language is really important. And for me, it's about ancestral accountability. It's about ancestral accountability.
It is very much that.
Right. And what I mean by that is where and how have Black folks already been practicing the embodied? And sometimes I feel like the term somatic, as useful as it is, as powerful as it is, there's a lot of amazing work, right, coming out. Resma Menakem, Dr. Ray Johnson. There's all of these folks doing a really incredible somatic work. And at the same time, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we already know this. And I don't know the language to use besides that. And maybe that's what we have right now.
It is what you're saying, though, that we already knew this is so key to Texas Freedom Colonies Project, because I trusted there was a knowingness in people who were descendants of this community, and that what their knowingness we needed to move forward, and frankly, I think to survive. I didn't know what it was that we needed it for to survive, but I know that there's a knowledge that as we talk about disaster, hazards, recovery, plan, climate change, I don't care what it is, okay, that we need this knowingness. And that is here. It's, it's all here as I'm saying it. I know it.
And the way that we honor that. And it's challenging because we'll talk more about this later too, but there are so many assumptions about Black embodiment. Right? It just, what Black people, what we do with our bodies, what we don't know, how we abuse our bodies. So especially in community health and kind of healing work, there's so many assumptions that I encounter around what Black folks don't know. And I was thinking about the percentage of time that I spend dismantling these kinds of assumptions and addressing them in my work. And while I don't want to spend all of my time doing that, right, I do have to, right, to some degree, in order to be able to have the conversation, not just with other folks who are non-Black, right, but also with ourselves, because part of it is about finding the language that feels almost integral to the work. If ancestral doesn't make sense, maybe integral feels better. And there's a quote that some of you are like, oh, Naya, you love this book. It's like all tattered. I've been talking about it all year.
Yes.
For some self-regard. I mean, it's like bent up. It's Toni Morrison, Goddess.
Yes.
Okay. Ancestor. And in this essay called Rememory, I was thinking about, and it might have been one of her speeches, so forgive me y'all if I'm not saying it correctly here, but she talks about what was necessary for her work, you know, and she says that she's keenly aware of the fact that I write in a wholly racialized society that can and does hobble the imagination. Okay. Labels about centrality, marginality, minority, gestures of appropriated and appropriating cultures, pressures to take a position, all these surface when I am read or critiqued and when I compose. It is both an intolerable and inevitable condition. So she's talking about doing the work in a world that doesn't expect Black aliveness, right?
Yes, because as you say that, what's been coming up for me this week around the list, the pressure, the deadlines, all the things is very much, oh, remember, you were never meant to survive anyway. Audrey's come forth over and over. Audre Lorde has been saying, you know, you were never meant to survive. And then I go, oh, wait a minute. That wasn't, that was never the plan. The aliveness.
So what does it mean? Yeah. So what does it mean to map communities that have indeed survived?
Exactly.
To breathe with people that have indeed survived.
Yes.
And to honor those that didn't at the same time.
At the same time.
At the same time. Al mismo tiempo, right? At the same time.
Sí.
And I want to bring up too, one of the things that struck me as I was sitting with our conversation here today is that we both have roots in Texas and in East Texas in particular ways. And so there's a proximity to the work that is embodied already and felt, you know, that pull and that call to do this kind of work where we're gathering knowledges from and with people. It's also about gathering knowledge about ourselves as individuals and the collective. Yes. And I also was thinking about just coming from, I recently co-presented with an amazing Ona McGovern, might be listening, hi, at the National Young Farmers Leadership Convergence. And it was a virtual, of course, 2020, it was virtual. And one of the things that we talked about were ancestors. And in my bio for that event, I was talking about being the descendant, that word, I appreciate how you use it so much, the descendant of earth workers, Mexican migrant farm laborers on my mom's side from West Texas, and then sharecroppers, farmers, enslaved laborers, gardeners, Black folks, African Americans from East Texas.
Yes.
And what that means to kind of embody and have connections to kind of both sides of Texas, the part that sometimes people consider the South, right? The deeper South.
Right.
And maybe the part that people consider more Southwest in terms of the environment, the terrain, the demographics, the history. So there's all these complexities. And one of the things I'm really interested in with you is what even called you to do this work in the first place? And maybe that connects with our questions around what is this kind of embodied inquiry for?
Yes, so I've been thinking about how we came to know each other, because getting to know you was such a catalyst for going into Texas Freedom Colony's project work very deeply. And what happened as a consequence was meeting people in Shankleville, Texas, and learning about the power of story in their work. And me sitting down with our mutual advisor friend, Dr. Bjorn Sleto at UT, and I was sitting down with Bjorn and I said, almost as if it were a pipe dream, you know, what I really love to do is just spend all my time in these communities, listening to these people tell their stories. And he said, okay. And I just startled myself, because throughout my entire life, I've been most interested in the poetics of life experience and writing poetry and writing literature and writing stories and reading and loving literature, and always feeling as if it were utterly ridiculous to indulge that impulse, because it doesn't make you rich. It's impractical. There were all of these labels associated with that. And even the pursuit of education for me was very much about, how do I create security for myself and for others and for future generations? Because for those of us who come from middle to working class communities of color, there's, certain things are a luxury to us. And so the moment, the catalyst of you connecting me, and then also losing people in my family, and then, you know, who were, had a whole history and set of stories that I didn't record, wasn't around to record. And then this realization that I was still in love with the story in that way of knowing, that all came together to really focus me in on narrative and embodied and local knowledge, and validating, almost having it as a crusade. And, you know, I come from evangelists, I come from charismatic spiritual people, and that's embodied. And so that's the passion that I bring to in the way I go about doing my work. And so I've come to this with all of that. So you're like, what make you come to Texas Freedom Colonies Project, and also to this question, this inquiry, this mode? And it's really the ways in which I've been challenged, continue to be challenged, to be able to continue to follow the passion of the story as a mode of inquiry. And, you know, just feeling really challenged by the ancestors who are saying, yes, that's the right direction. And then everything else that says, yes, but if you do that, you know, where's the data set? Who's going to pay for you to do that? How are you going to publish off of that? Oh, wait, you're an academic. Oh, wait, you have tenure track. What is it? You know, how does this show impact? What is the meaning? What do these definitions mean? How do you prove it's right? So there's this preponderance of everything that comes at you and says that this mode of inquiry that is part and parcel of who you are, just like your hair, that people are like, I'm sorry, I need to question that. And I'm like, but what? So I'm coming to this with the preponderance of, you know, someone jokingly said in our chat, how do you do all the things we do? And I said, you know, part of me is like, well, we're, you know, Black people have always done everything they had to do. They've made a way out of no way, all that. But it really is that we're coming to a point where we have to have a different mode of inquiry, I think, to make the next level of impact, not level of impact on anybody else's terms, but in terms of purpose. Fulfilling purpose.
Yeah. There's such a sense of following directives. That's the word I'm getting. Following ancestral directives in your work. And I think this is where we resonate on several fronts. But one way in which we resonate is the following of the directive. And one of the things that's so interesting to me about the preponderance, big word for early in the morning here.
Yes.
Of questions and pressures that you mentioned is that none of them are true.
Right.
Mira, like, look at the abundance of Texas Freedom Colonies. Like, I can feel it just as I said that. Is anyone feeling the abundance of the work? Can we hear that on Facebook? Can you say yes? Or what you're feeling about the work? Whatever you want to say.
Here's the thing is, as we're talking, you know, I know there's a lot, I'm sitting here, even me, as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Naya going, So it's hard to write and think and pose questions while we're just
right.
You know,
but if you do, you know, because there is an untruth to it. And I feel like I have witnessed so many untruths, and I want to name some of them explicitly because there may be folks
Oh,
listening to this call. In fact, I know during my office hours, really what I'm mostly talking to students about, especially students of color, first generation students. Maybe some of
yes.
you are listening to this. Hello, you're wonderful. Um, is about vocation and about identifying, discerning the untruths. You know, there is truth. If you are called to follow story, do it. Reach out to Dr. Roberts and I, reach out to folks on
Yes.
this call, know that you have resources. And I have a ferocity around this because at multiple times in my path and my journey, I was told, will people be interested in this?
Hmm. Yes.
Will people be interested in this? Don't call yourself this, call yourself this instead. Are you sure you want
Hmm.
to be known as a traditional medicine practitioner in academic space? For me, none of those things are really a choice. And I don't know, and I mean that in a divine, beautiful way. In following the directives and doing the work, there's something so powerful and so abundant. And what I found is every time I answer a directive, pathways open,
Mm.
pathways open. So by that, I mean, you mentioned culture of health leaders at the very beginning of the call and how I was part of that. I had an inkling to apply to that program. If you're not in the academy, you're in the academy. It's a beautiful program to explore and be able to explore different things you might be interested in, including arts-based work. And that following that inkling opened up that opportunity to work with communities across the country in different ways and more embodied ways, number one. And number two, for me to realize that it was time for this 12-year journey I had been on in terms of healing arts and traditional medicine. We can talk about what that even means.
Please
For,
do.
for
Yes.
it to be central to the research, and not central in terms of just content, but in terms of the word you use so beautifully, and I want to bow to it, the word mode. Like it's not
Mm.
just about the content, but something you're naming and have been doing already in terms of embodied work is that the way of the work matters. The way of the work is a response to the directive, not just the content. Does that make sense? Like not just
Mhm.
studying African American Black freedom colonies, but in
Right.
order to do that, there is a different mode that's necessary,
Yes, because you can't see
right?
and you cannot hear without a different mode. Because I'll to give you a very concrete example of communicating what these places are and saying, number one, we have certain books that tell us what these places are. And so I have a lot of African Americans come to me and say, give me the definition so I know if mine is fits. And then I counter to them, well, I can tell you what books have told us our place is and have told us what freedom colonies are. But we really need your knowledge, and we really need you to tell your stories and to aggregate your knowledge to fill in the gaps. And they go, but no, I'm going to you, the academic, the expert, give me the definition. And so I can tell other people that we fit in that definition and thus we count. And I say instead, you count because we can't tell the truth without you. And we can't tell the real story of what these places are and what their definition is without you. And to some that reads as incompleteness and she doesn't know. Versus I could spit out a number of books that tell us what they tell us our places are, that they're called towns, that they're called this, and that this list of these 10 places matter. And I'm telling you that you need to take all that, put in a little box over here, and validate what you bring as being able to fill in the gaps and tell us another truth rather than continually to wait for certain people to tell us who we are and that we matter. And that, we get in this whole vindicationist mode of us proving up how much we're like other people. So we can say, see, we're just like them, or we did this. And it's like, no, let's take a pause. As you said, take a pause.
Take a pause.
And everyone that is calling me or that contacts any of us on the team that wants to tell us their story, we're taking it in not as, okay, does this fit or not? That's we're not a gatekeeper of are you a town or not, or can we determine how many of these are like a official incorporated town and thus you matter. I don't care about that. I care about us getting our story.
Yeah.
And not for sentimental, you know, this is sentimentality, this is values. This is also about us going into this new year with so-called new administration and new leadership and this, that, and the other, and saying, what are we going to decide? Who are we going to be?
What does our knowledge look like?
Yes.
Right? What does our knowledge feel like?
Yes.
What does it feel like? And what does it feel like? How does it feel? I really appreciate your use of the word validate, because it strikes me as such a, for lack of a better word right now, like a reclaiming of the word and a decolonizing. Because you're not, it's a validation that comes from within and in relationship with each other, with other freedom colonies, rather than from the preponderance that you mentioned before. And there's such a power there. And I think one of the reasons I'm so interested and obsessed with feeling is, one, because I feel really deeply. Right? I feel everything. Right? So there's a personal sense of feeling and depth of feeling.
Absolutely.
But there's also how validating it is and how important it is to acknowledge that we as Black folks and Indigenous and other people of color that I work with as well, and we reclaim our feelings with, that we feel, you know, and to be asked, how does it feel feels so revolutionary and radical.
It really
and to
does.
have space to really engage with that. So part of our work together with Texas Freedom Colonies will be these spaces with descendants of the Freedom Colonies themselves, right? In addition to other spaces and conversations with faculty and students. And the reason we have those intentional spaces is because we want to go really deeply with descendants themselves and around these questions of how does it feel to be on land, to reclaim land, to connect with your garden, right? All these different questions, to connect with each other, to create place, not just possess place, like those kinds of questions. How beautiful and powerful to feel together. When let me tell you, you know, I really can't express the depth and power of a room of Black folks feeling together in my experience. And with pause, with witnessing. And in the past, I've mainly done this with other Black identified women, folk, along with Black queer community, all kinds of folks who, what we're talking about too are people who may be feeling in ways that are traumatic, right? So I want to be clear, like it's not just about embodied for embodied sake, or just to relax or bliss out, or to quote, be quote, more productive, right? It's about understanding and feeling through, you know what, this is very real, these traumas, these challenges, and we know this is a freedom colony, and we know we exist in these ways. And we know that what we're building, you talked about like the institutional pressures. Yes. We know that what you've been building and co-creating with your team is an institution, is a reimagining of institution and legacy. Right. I mean, what power. This is also happening. This too is happening.
And there is a lot of push and pull and tension, because we talk about decolonizing, and I'm very careful about how I use that, because for people who are descendants of countries in which colonization has happened, and people who have an ancestral tie to Turtle Island in a certain way. So I'm just very conscious of using this language, but I will say that it infiltrates the ways that we operate as researchers and in academia with other people of color, with you know, the pressure that I feel comes out at the people around me, you know. So that's the challenge too, is how do we, in this new abundance of people coming to me and saying, oh, you're really interesting, I want to do this and that and the other, that it doesn't boil down to, okay, so it's more pressure for me, then it becomes more pressure for Jennifer and Valentina. No, then I'm reproducing a certain energy that I don't mean to reproduce, that doesn't benefit the descendants, doesn't benefit the work. And this is very much about what you're talking about, is relationship, how to be in relationship and do things in relationship. And that's sort of the aspiration of the coming year, what it means to calling forth freedom. How do I call forth and embrace more relationship? Because that's been the challenge in doing this work in a lot of ways. Either people needing a lot of relationship. I've been talking to people, we even have an intake form, that, you know, that word intake. Well, it's very real, and you know, it is a thing, and you need to be able to organize
Take
information. Yeah, but really, sometimes when I'm talking to people, it really is a form of a counseling session. It's not just consultation, it really is a counseling. And so, okay, well, that takes time. But wait a minute, you don't have time. You have, here's the questions, here's the data, get the paper out. Here's the questions, here's the data, get the paper out. You know, it's still, it's really attention until we create a different way.
Yes.
And so rather than me do this in a vacuum, we thought, hey, Naya, why don't you come on down to Texas A&M University and share this with my team? Let's share it with Freedom Colonies. Let's share it with Texas A&M University. Yay. Surprise!
And I'm looking at and how generative that is, right? That is a different way of moving. Those of us who, so many, I mean, it's not even just academe. I feel like so many settings that I've been in, from the nonprofit to the policy to activism, sometimes even grassroots activism.
Yes.
There's the tensions and really the inner work of social justice, right? There's that new book. I cannot remember the authors. Maybe someone on Facebook can help us with that.
I'm thinking about Adrienne Marie Brown a lot right now.
Adrienne Marie Brown as well, right? Also someone who engages really critically and beautifully with somatics, right? And the body and embodiment, but how necessary it is. And again, it's about the mode, like the way in which we're moving. And it takes some time to articulate that, at least for me. I know that for so long, I've been kind of a food scholar, right? People consider me a food scholar, which is so beautiful. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I am talking about Black food geographies. I am really interested in Black gardens, but I'm not only interested in food, and more deeply, I'm interested in the mode of the work. And as someone said here in the comments, in questions of community epistemology. So we're seeing some chat, right? And in terms of not privileging, someone said scientific inquiry and quantitative frameworks.
Yes. Would you like them to share this for us? You would like Skylar?
Yeah, please do. Share some of these comments, starting with the hair one.
The hair one.
There's a hair comment.
Yeah. And so we had one of our Facebook viewers mention, we were talking about embodiment, and she mentioned about hair and the presence of, basically the presence of hair in the academy, and how, you know, professionalism, how hair is viewed as versus professionalism versus non-professional styles. So I don't know if you guys wanted to elaborate on any of that.
Yeah, I think post-COVID, that's real interesting, because, you know, it's sort of at a certain point, there's a relaxed nature of the way that we've been, because we're working out of our own homes. But then I think it's also a time when we're being more of ourselves as people of color with different hair, and you just have to accept it. And I think, I mean, I'd be very interesting to see how many people have decided to, you know, have different hair as a result of all of this. But yeah, academy, it's a signal. It says a certain something. It means a certain something. But go ahead, Skylar. Anything else?
Another comment with a viewer mentioned, Dr. Roberts, your words in this convo about storytelling and reminding them about how narrative is a literal proven backbone for knowledge creation and cognition, and then at the same time so constantly devalued in the privileging of scientific inquiry and quantitative frameworks of academia, to say nothing of the neoliberal commodification of education and the whole other story. They go on to say, all of this, of course, is also highly intersectional, racialized, and gendered.
And classed.
There's a lot going on there. Yeah.
That was a little meaty comment, but
thank you. We'll be feasting off that one throughout the weekend.
Oh, yeah,
that was stupid. I will say here some of the key things that are being lifted up around the scientific inquiry. What is science in the first place? It's interesting too, because my latest research is about African-American gardens. Andrea, we talked about this already before. And not only as food sources, right, but the aesthetics and the experience, the embodied experiences of gardens, especially beyond the South and among descendants of the Great Migration. What?
Yes.
So I'm really excited about this work. And that means also understanding Black folks as doing scientific inquiry in their gardens, as they're observing their gardens, as they're noticing their gardens, as they're witnessing climate change over decades and generations of gardening in some cases, or reclaiming it in others. So all of these different questions of what is considered knowledge, and the question of the neoliberal commodification of education, which is very much at the forefront right now. In other words, education for profit, right? Among other things. It's a big deal during the pandemic. It'll be interesting to see what this means for our work, what this means for funding, and how we do the work anyway, right? I mean, how we do the work anyway. And I think hopefully something that's coming out of our conversation, and I know I feel it with Andrea all the time, is that we would do the work anyway. Like, it's not about if we have the grant, the next grant, right? Again, because it is a directive, ancestral directive, we will find ways to do the work, and the ways will find us, like this grant that we have to do this work together right now. So really being clear about that. And it would be nice to put the names, okay. And we're gonna try to put the names of the people making comments too. So we know we don't see your names on this end, but thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, I just want to thank you. Yes. I just want to thank you, Naya, though, because you're coaching me through. Every so often you'll text me, or you'll connect with me and really still, kind of pull me into myself as I appear with the no, but the this and the that and the other. Everybody needs this. I'm bringing this up because I think in our calling forth freedom, you need somebody who's going to always remind you of your mission, who's going to tell you the truth. And part of that is constantly helping you remember your core research question, your core project. And that's the writing accountability people. That's the people who are saying, always remember our project and the conversation we want to continue. Make it part of your work. It doesn't have to happen over here. It can be part and parcel of the whole work. And that's what we've been mutually coaching each other, but I feel like Naya's coaching me more on is keeping it part of the work.
Keeping it part of the work.
Yeah.
And what is that, what might that require? I mean, to be honest, sometimes it requires recognizing that you may receive pushback and people may question the method and the methodology. And again, for anybody listening who is exploring qualitative methods, storytelling as method, embodied methods, also how we tell stories through our bodies and with our bodies, right? Really reimagining, reclaiming how story is told and not assuming it's only written. And that's why it's so beautiful. People can send the photograph with the really kind of detailed description. You all talked about that in the video, for Texas Freedom Colonies. That's another mode, again, of telling story. But remembering that us being here is a testimony, us and our conversation, to being able to engage the work in a way that is meaningful, authentic to oneself, to our communities, accountable, which deserves maybe its own conversation.
Yes.
In relationship and not in competition, right? Really reimagining as to Black folks in the academy, in kin fields, in planning yourself, and in geography. So really noticing that sometimes it can feel like, especially if we're in certain contexts, that we're the only ones doing the work, but we're here testifying before you saying, you're not alone, right? We're not alone.
Yes. And then conversely though, well, she's doing it, I do that. No, I do that. No, I do that.
That's mine.
That's mine. And so, and just so people understand, I think it's important for people to understand that part of where that comes from is a human thing, that I want to be seen and I want to be valued.
Yeah.
And then part of it comes from that human thing called insecurity, but part of it comes from institutional survival, meaning academia says not only that it's good enough for you to show up in a classroom and teach, increasingly, that's the last thing that's important. It's the most important to impart knowledge in that process of exchange of learning. But increasingly, your value in the institution is that you can say that you have been the first and the only. The first, the only, or the most. And if you're not an additive to those kind of pursuits, then the academy says, I don't know what to do with you, and you don't fit into our value system. So as we say the words neoliberal, that's what I'm saying to you, is that there's a university value system around the planet. And so when people are talking that way about, no, I did this, or I do this, or I do that, they're talking out of a space of, you know, part of how I get evaluated and part of how, not just me, anyone, of what matters is being able to translate what you do matters in a certain way. And so a lot of that, which makes it hard for us to be in relationship and to collaborate and to say, this is what I bring. No, this is what I bring. Okay, how can it come together? Well, then that dilutes what I bring. And so I can't do that because that'll annihilate me. That's, I mean, and that's really the kind of, you know, and people are saying, well, no, it's just about helping these people. Why can't you just focus on helping the people? You can. We try, we do. And then there's
all of these other things.
Yeah. Why can't we just live on rainbows?
I like that.
But, you know, they're worthwhile questions, but at the same time, I think part of doing the work differently is you really have to confront and get real about what is.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping to do through this process, is to walk us through what is, the sticky parts of what is.
Yeah, because it is, right? And it is necessary to do that. I want to make sure I'm aware of our time, and we're going to have a bit of a kind of tying together of some things here, but I want to also name what I've been thinking about in terms of what is the land back movement, Indigenous and Native movement, and how that relates, and questions we've been talking about together too, around Indigenous land, Native lands, and what that means to have a freedom colony on such lands, what that means to have a garden, you know, in the research that I just mentioned, and a home garden at that, to even have a home on Indigenous land. And there's a lot of questions around that, and again, deserves its own conversation, but I want to lift it up and acknowledge that we're living in a moment of resurgent and deepening movements that for Black lives, for Indigenous, Native sovereignty and lands, say her name. I mean, there's so many converging movements that really matter. And what I appreciate at the same time is, no matter the movements and no matter the resurgence, The thing about doing the work that is most authentic to us is it doesn't move. Like it doesn't change with the weather, right? It's always been responsive. Texas Freedom Colony's work always matters. And then in these moments, we can ask how it matters in relationship to these movements still, and to these evolving kinds of mobilizations. So there's so many rich questions there. And I know as someone who is a Black, identifies as a Black woman and a Black Chicana, right? There's a lot of questions that I bring around how gardens and land and Black freedom and unfreedom relates to Indigenous and Native freedom and unfreedom. So there's all of this, there's that relationship piece that also matters in that way.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a woman that I met some time ago at a conference, like 5-6 years ago. And she turned to me and she said, when do Black people stop being Indigenous?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, it's one of those how your brain goes.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's a very interesting question, because seeing as how, since Esteban in 1528, we've been here in a certain way on the shores of Galveston.
And we brought Indigenous knowledge when we did that.
And we brought Indigenous
when we were brought over.
We were brought over about rice and about, cattle farming. We talked about that. Remember about the cattle farming from West Africa, and all of the knowledges that were when we were forcibly held captive and brought here. And so this very real conversation about the future of the land in light of the past of the land and everyone's different relationship of the land and landscape is huge and integral to us moving forward together, because as you're talking about accountability and all of these pieces, we do have to unpack a real attachment to land that we've all kind of internalized, that is sometimes what's real, sometimes what's fantasy and somebody else's fantasy, and not at all what's going to get us through impending climate change and everything else. Like, it's just not. And so when I say freedom colony, there was a book, there was a definition associated with that, with an embedded idea about the relationship between Black people and land. And that's so important, why we want the stories of what the land is to you and what makes you feel free. Why is it called a freedom colony to you? Not just because I called it that or some book called it that. That's why that process of telling us is so important. Because in that, we're going to find out how much have we internalized and how much is going to enable us to have an honest conversation with Indigenous or Native people, let's say, Native and First Nations people. There's a certain way we've got to come to conversation in that. And I don't think we can until we process what it is about these places or these communities that offer us or make us feel free.
Yeah. And is these questions of home place, home, that are so important, and bound up with that in terms of Blackness and seeking home and finding home and creating home and connecting with homeland, and why that matters so much, and understanding that Black folks are forcibly African-Americans I'm talking about, because there's all kinds of Black folks, right? I'm speaking specifically to African-Americans, are a forced migrant population, right? And understanding that and keeping that forefront. And what does that mean in terms of trauma, in terms of relationship with each other as Black folks and the academy and beyond, with other groups of folks, with groups that we may also identify with, just all those complexities. There's so much richness. And in our spaces together, I'm sure we're going to share more with people, but the spaces that we have with each other and with the descendants of freedom colonies will really be feeling into these questions. And so, transitioning into the closing, magically, we know there's so much more here. And if you do have further questions or comments, we know we really didn't talk about the pandemic specifically, but we kind of know it's all in our context right now. So maybe that's something to continue moving forward. But if you do have questions or comments, maybe send them to the Texas Freedom Colonies team.
Yes.
Right?
freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com. And if you could put in the subject, calling forth freedom, then we'll know it's in reference to this conversation that we're having. Calling forth freedom to our Freedom Colonies Project at gmail.com. And I just want to enumerate here, if y'all are wondering what's next, please understand that this is a conversation we're going to have over an 18-month period at least, in different contexts, initially here, and then again, we hope in community, in place, in a way that allows for an artistic expression. And then another opportunity in which we're doing some kind of intensive with folks at Texas A&M, with fellow faculty members, to get some enrichment, some professional development around qualitative and embodied research. So that is what the future holds for us. I want to thank Naya, but I also want to give you space, Naya, to, if you're called to do any type of specific ritual or call or anything else, please, you're welcome to share that now.
Because you see me look at my altar like,
Yes.
Now that you say it. So many of you know that I bring the rattle into so many spaces and as part of my practice. But I'm just going to rattle and kind of fiercely, right? Just to allow us, again, if you're listening and you are able to close your eyes, taking in different threads. Are there words that really stood out to you? You can even put them in the Facebook kind of chat too, or email them later. But taking that which you need from the conversation, and what I sometimes say is leaving the rest, right? So I'm going to shake this, close my eyes, invite you to inhale and exhale. So slowing down a little bit. And if your eyes are closed or if they're open, allowing yourself to inhale with us again. And exhale. When Andrea and I come into conversation, there's a lot of movement, a lot of things are stirred up. There's a tempo that sometimes can pick up and slow down and deepen. It moves in different ways, and maybe you felt that. Taking a moment just to slow down together. Maybe you bring again your palms, your attention to your heart space. Sense how this conversation is landing in your body, in your breath. Know that this embodied inquiry is a method, right? Is valid, is affirming, is possible, and is always available to you and to us. And that for so many of us, it's part of the knowledge that we already bring to living, working, creating freedom, imagining freedom. Inhaling one more time. And opening your eyes as you're ready. Ooh, we all slow down into some deliciousness. Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Your team, people who
Thank
are
you.
witnessing, listening.
Yes. So we have very little time today left. I want to say these things really quickly before I give it to Skylar to close us out. I will say that we have two last exciting announcements. One of our films featuring and one of our descendant community, Gloria Smith and myself, film was in the Houston Cinema Arts Film Festival, and we got the audience prize. And so we will be celebrating that soon. And we have a number of other projects that are ongoing. Know that we are very, 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 very busy. And it's just us. I don't want to say just us, but really it's just us for right now. And as a consequence, we're an evolving social justice enterprise. And as such, we ask your patience and understanding as we take a pause, very intentional pause, in which we'll be open for business, so to speak. We're kind of shutting down between December 15th to January 15th. And late January, we'll be revisiting you with a new set of plans and vision for the coming year. But until then, we're going to be remembering and continuing to celebrate what we've done this year and inviting you into all the ways that you can become a part of what we do. And with that, Skylar, you want to talk about or just help people remember the various ways in which they can engage and be part of our work?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Roberts, and thank you, Dr. Jones. That was amazing. I think we all feel a little bit freer after that. But I do want to just remind everybody, as you saw in the video, that there are a number of ways that you can contact us. One being the intake form that Dr. Roberts mentioned. We'll be posting the link to the intake form on our social media platforms today, as well as it can be found on our, you can email us and we can send you the intake form directly. Again, always upload to the Atlas. The Atlas is always open for business. So continue to collect information and share information via the Atlas. Our Adopt a County program, as Dr. Roberts mentioned, we'll be giving some updates about our further orientations and other programs and things that we'll be doing with our Adopt a County in January. If you would like to co-host a coffee talk or be a guest on our coffee talk, we'll be moving and kind of transitioning to more of co-hosting format for coffee talk. So just let us know, send us an email, freedomcoloniesproject@gmail.com, if you would like to be a guest or host with us and have some great conversation. As far as events, yes, just let us know about Coffee Talk. We'll be having one in January and February. Yes, contact us. Our email, Instagram, YouTube, all of that. On Facebook at the Texas Freedom Colonies Project. On YouTube, the Texas Freedom Colonies channel, and on Instagram at freedom_colonies_project.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Yes. Again, I want to thank you all for going on this journey with us today. Again, we're going to be very deliberate in slowing a lot down. And part of that is going to be, again, inviting you in to this coffee talk space to co-produce it with us. We will not have one in January. We'll have a check-in in January. We'll have a full program in February. And we probably will go to having them every other month. Because these have been so special and so exciting, and they do take a lot out of us in addition to the rest of the work that we do. And so with that, I want to again thank Dr. Naya Jones. She will be back with us over the next 18 months as we collaborate and continue to call forth freedom for ourselves and for the communities that we engage with. And we are again so thankful to you on Twitter, to you on Instagram, to you on Facebook, to you on email and snail mail and everything else. Much love to all of you, and thank you so much. Thank you.